Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Courthouse Park Community Workshop, our virtual edition. This meeting is being recorded. We've started recording just a moment ago, and we're going to make it available to everyone to watch if any of your friends or colleagues were not able to make it. I am Stephen Lee. I'm with SWA Group. We're a landscape architecture firm that's been hired by the city to help design the park based on all of the great community feedback that we've been receiving. And I'm here today with my colleagues from SWA, as well as with many members of the city staff and the Courthouse Park Advocacy Group, who are all of whom are showing up as panelists on this meeting. So today, what we wanted to do is just kind of introduce the project. This is a follow-up workshop to one that we had in the fall of last year, where we had a really great public meeting and had about 50 in-person attendees and 80 participants who joined virtually. And what we've been doing last week and this week is a series of community workshops, both in person as well as virtual. We had one at Brennan Courthouse, one at Dickinson High School, and then today is the virtual meeting and the final meeting of this round of community engagement. And the format has been the same for all meetings. We've been starting with a presentation by the city and the design team, followed by Q&A and discussion and comments, which today we'll be using the Q&A feature on this Zoom webinar. So feel free at any time to start to enter questions, and we will answer them as they come up. And then we'll end the meeting with an online survey, and we'll put that in the chat for everyone to be able to easily click on that link and take the survey if you haven't already. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Barka Patel, who is the director of the Department of Infrastructure for Jersey City. And Barka will give a general project introduction and make some opening remarks, and then we'll have a short Q&A session for general questions about the project.
Thank you, Stephen, and hello everyone joining the webinar today, as well as anyone joining via the recording. We are really excited to initiate this project with the community, and we see it as a really unique opportunity to create park space in Journal Square where there currently isn't adequate green or open space for the residents in this community. And given that Journal Square is one of the fastest growing neighborhoods, not only in the city, but in our greater region and the country, we see this park as a really rare opportunity to provide green space and to advance a lot of the city's goals around open space, sustainability, equity, and accessible transportation. And we're hoping to capture as many of those needs within the design of this project as possible. So we're really excited to share with you the concepts that we've come up with at this round of the project design. And I want to share that the project is being developed in partnership with Hudson County, who is currently the owner of the site that we're working on, as well as the Courthouse Park Advocacy Group. The members of the Courthouse Park Advocacy Group board are on the meeting with us here today, and they've been on previous meetings and have been giving really valuable input into the design of this future park space. And then, of course, the design work itself is being done by our consultants, SWA, and their sub-consultants. So this is the project team, and at various stages as we're developing the project, we will be coming back to you, the community, to present on what we've come up with, make sure that we're getting the design choices correct and incorporating your feedback correctly. And this is the second round of that. And quickly, just a little bit more about the site itself, if we can go back one slide. For those who aren't familiar, the site that we're talking about is next to the Brennan Courthouse. It's about a 3.5 acre site that is currently the location of the Hudson County Administrative Building, county employees are currently in that building and working out of that building. And the plan of this project is that once these employees move to their new location in the Justice Complex, that the building at this location would be demolished and would be converted into a park. The city, as I mentioned, is going through the design process. We will also be responsible for the demolition of that building and the construction of the park, and the site will be under city jurisdiction. The budget for this project is $14 million currently, which has been allocated in the city's capital budget last year. And the timeline for the remainder of the project after we conclude the design phase this year is to move to demolition of the building next year, and then hopefully to complete the construction of the park in 2025 or 2026. So I'm going to pause there. And like Stephen mentioned earlier, see if there are questions from the participants so far about those project details or any details about the site. We would like to focus the majority of this workshop with you on the design and the concepts that we've come up with. And so if there are any questions not related to the concepts, we would like to go through them right now and answer them. So like Stephen mentioned earlier, you can type your questions in the Q&A function of this webinar. I will read them out loud, and either I will answer them or direct the project team to answer them. So the first question we have is, how does this acreage compare to Van Voorst Park or Hamilton Park? Great question. Later on in the presentation, you will see a more comprehensive comparison of size to other Jersey City parks. Hamilton Park is about 5.2 acres, and this park would be 3.5 acres, so just slightly smaller than Hamilton Park. The next question is, there's an existing underground parking garage. Will it be used, and if so, how? Another good question. So yes, currently there is an existing parking garage under the building, which is used by the employees and by others working out of that building. The plan as of now is to try to retain the parking garage as a part of this project. However, as we move through the design, a lot of these decisions will be determined based on the budget that we have available and how much retaining that parking garage would cost in comparison to other park elements that we will have to build out with the budget that we have available. So if we're able to keep the parking garage and have that be an amenity to the residents and to the public, it is something that we will seriously consider as an element of this project. But it remains to be seen, and it's something that will be determined by cost later on in the project. Okay, so I'm seeing more questions now about design details within the park itself. For example, will there be water fountains in the park? How big will the park be again? Will a bicycle rack be installed? So all of those questions will be answered by the team as they go through the concept. So I won't answer them right now, but I will leave them unanswered in the Q&A so we make sure we don't forget them for the rest of the presentation. Any other questions about timeline, the site, cost, anything like that? Please enter them now. Will the demolition cause any road closures? Yes, it likely will. We will, of course, try to limit impact to the surrounding neighborhood, but there likely will be some impact to the surrounding roadways during demolition. Okay, I'll give 30 more seconds for any other questions about the site, and if there aren't any, I will hand it back over to Stephen to go through the rest of the presentation. So next, we're going to present on the feedback that we received from the community during the last round of public engagement, which was in November. And after that, we will go through the 3 concepts that we've come up with and walk you through the specific details with each one. So Stephen, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Great. I think there was one more general question. When will the park be open?
Oh, yes. Thank you. So we are hopeful that we can open up the park in early 2026. Hopefully even sooner than that in 2025, but 26 is a conservative estimate.
Okay, great. So as Barka mentioned, we would like to summarize all of the community feedback that we heard in the fall. We had a workshop in November of 2022, and this was before we had put pen to paper or really started to design at all. So it was really intended to be an open, very open-ended dialogue about what the community wanted to see in the park as far as program and amenities, and what were kind of the issues that you wanted to make sure that the design team was aware of when starting to design the park. So these were just some photos from that meeting, as well as some of the sticky notes and comments that we received on the physical boards that were there. And the way that we organized getting some of the more kind of directed feedback was we asked a series of questions, both in person through the voting that you saw with the sticky notes and the stickers, but also we created an online survey that was essentially the same format and the same questions. The first question that we asked was, what type of green space is most important to you? We received 187 responses on the online survey, and in person there were about 44. You can see the results of the survey for this question. In both cases, tree grove was the #1 preference when given the choices of multi-purpose lawn, gardens, topographic features, and tree groves or bosques. So we heard from the community that there was a strong desire to have shade and greenery and trees given the lack of trees in the neighborhood. The multi-purpose lawn came in as a close second. Question 2 was, what type of play space is most important to you? Children's playscape, multi-generational play space, urban dog run, and recreational games. And the top choice was multi-generational play, and children's playscape came closely after. And just to give you a sense of what we mean by multi-generational play, it's not to kind of exclude children, but really it's the type of play environment like these shown here that could have a wide appeal to a range of users, from children to teenagers to even adults. Question 3 was, what special park feature or element is most appealing to you? The options were interactive water feature, public art, special lighting displays, and reclaimed historic infrastructure. And there was a clear preference here for interactive fountains. So I think one of the questions was, will there be water fountains in the park? And in all 3 concepts you're going to see here today, there is an interactive water feature or water fountain. If I can go back to that question later, but I don't know if it was intended to mean drinking fountains, which we also typically would provide as well in a public park setting. Those are the types of details that I think we will continue to get into in the coming months. Right now, as you'll see, the conceptual designs are very high level, kind of hand sketch, very loose sketches. And we will continue to refine the design to a kind of final concept in the coming months based on all the feedback that we're receiving. Question 4, what type of architectural feature is most appropriate for the park? The options were pavilion or shade structure, stage, cafe, kiosk, or public restroom. And we saw that there was a lot of support for both pavilion or shade structure and public restroom. So both of those will be have been incorporated into all of the concepts. Question 5, what category of public seating is most appealing to you? We, of course, feel strongly that public seating is such an important component of what makes a successful public space. So we want to make sure that we provide a variety of public seating types. But of the options that were presented, movable tables and chairs, amphitheater seating, lounge seating, and communal tables and seating, amphitheater seating and movable tables and chairs, as well as lounge seating, were all popular choices. Question 6, what category of recreation or fitness is most needed? Skate park, climbing wall, adult fitness, or outdoor gym, or sports courts? And there was a general preference here for adult fitness and sports courts, and little to no interest in the climbing wall or skate park. Which of the following other elements is most important? Flexible plaza space, deck, digital screen projection, or small shelter study room? Here, there was an overwhelming support, over 50%, for a flexible plaza space, and then small shelters or study rooms came in second. So it's, of course, difficult to synthesize all of the comments that we received, and we did read through all of them. It was a very long list. But what we're attempting to do here is to just show you some highlights of that community feedback. And we've categorized some of the comments by color, as you can see on the bottom. There was definitely a number of folks that explained that they want the design to really feel reflective of this particular neighborhood, and to celebrate the diversity of the neighborhood, to incorporate historic elements of the courthouse, given that we're adjacent to two pretty historic buildings, while also creating a modern park. In terms of program, there were requests for water features, dog and dog-free areas, inclusive play for children, a lot of comments about how this is a very family-oriented neighborhood and not a lot of places for children to play. So we definitely made sure to incorporate play spaces. A focus on sustainability and flood mitigation, and you'll see that incorporated into the designs as well. There were some concerns with kind of long-term maintenance, given that this will be a publicly owned and maintained park, making sure that we're keeping those long-term maintenance costs in mind as we're starting to design the park, as well as security concerns. And then finally, less concrete, more trees. And that was repeated a number of times in different ways. In this next slide, you'll see a comment about Journal Square lacking in trees, plant many trees, wanting places to sit in the shade on the grass, like at Hamilton Park. Given that Journal Square also is kind of has a strong arts community, utilizing art by local artists to help with kind of local storytelling, and making sure the design has references to the local neighborhood past as well as the future. And then in the yellow, you can see a long wish list of amenities, both kind of active recreation, but also public restrooms and cafes, wintertime activation, so making sure we're designing for all 4 seasons, and that the park is a really attractive place to visit even when it's wintertime. And then, planning for events such as farmers markets, yogas in the park, movies, fairs, etc. So from all of that feedback, we developed our consensus, what we're calling our consensus park program. And those elements are all shown here. I won't read through them, but we were able to integrate most, if not all, of these programmatic elements in the concepts that we're about to share. So these are now going to be the 3 concept options based on the community feedback. First, just a reminder of scale in terms of what we can actually fit in the site. Our site is 3.4 acres. For reference, Hamilton Park is 5.2 acres. Newport Green Park on the Hudson waterfront is about 4.3 acres, and Roberto Clemente Sports Complex, which is nearby, is 6.2 acres, but mostly occupied by sports fields and sports courts. The Path Plaza is under 1 acre, so that gives you a general sense of the scale of our park site. And with all the concepts, we really wanted to prioritize a design that feels very much tailored to Journal Square and that celebrates everything that's wonderful about this neighborhood in the past, present, and future. And so the designs that you'll see here today really had that in mind, and making sure that we weren't presenting like a kind of cookie cutter design approach, but one that was highly tailored to this site and its context. As we start to design a park, we're thinking about a lot of different factors in addition to kind of local storytelling and all of the feedback that we hear from the community. There are a lot of other things that we're trying to solve for. One is movement. So making sure that the park feels very accessible from the sidewalks, feels very permeable, and feels very inviting for anyone passing by as a pedestrian. Also looking at larger movement patterns throughout the neighborhood to allow for people to use the park to actually move through from one destination to another. And this is a great way to activate the park and make sure there's always kind of activity going on, even just by pulling people through the park. So this diagonal connection was one that we felt was important, and you'll see integrated into all of the designs. Second is the green buffer. So to create a green oasis by buffering the park from adjacent streets. We do know that there's a fair amount of vehicular traffic, and we want to make sure that the interior of the park feels somewhat protected from that traffic and is a much more kind of comfortable space to inhabit. Third is providing a range of amenities and different programs that will bring together diverse user groups, diverse constituents. And that's kind of what all of these different colored circles represents. Fourth is to celebrate context, both historic as well as contemporary and future landmarks like the Justice Complex being built across the street. Fifth is flexibility. So we, of course, want to make sure the park is a really comfortable and inviting space to inhabit day to day, but designing the space in a way that it can host larger community events and festivals, markets, food trucks, you name it. There's a whole range of activities that we think can and should happen here. And then finally, sustainability and resiliency. There are so many opportunities with the new green space to enhance biodiversity, to sequester carbon, to counteract heat island effect, and to also address issues around flooding using green infrastructure and stormwater management strategies. So the first concept, number one, is celebrating the fact that Courthouse Park sits at a geographic crossroads, and historically this neighborhood has been a landing pad for immigrants from around the globe. And so we're thinking of this scheme, the park being a kind of cultural crossroads where all of these old and new residents, workers, and visitors can kind of come and mingle and share in new experiences together. So in this plan, you can see here, it quite literally translates into this crossroads where all of these paths from the adjacent streets are coming together to a central plaza. And I'll just walk you through kind of entering the site from the corner of Central Avenue and Pavonia. There's a small plaza right at the corner that might have some seating and signage that welcomes you into the park. You make your way in and past these bioswales at the south and western edges of the park that are also doubling as the green buffer that we talked about. Moving into a kind of more multi-generational play area that might have kind of overscaled play equipment, table games, interactive furniture that would have a really wide appeal to a lot of different users. And then on the other side, a playscape that would be exclusively for children and families. The path leads further into a crossroads plaza in the center of the site that would have an interactive fountain, or also known as a splash pad, that would help to activate this space. But these jets could also be turned off, and this would be a large kind of events plaza with a pavilion along one side that would provide shade and shelter. And then this opens up onto a larger lawn space to the east. And then this is the courthouse over here, where we'd transform this existing surface parking lot into more lawn space that could be a spillover spectator area in the event that this is used for a large event. And then from that central plaza, you could make your way over to the powerhouse, which in all of the schemes we're showing the powerhouse being converted from its current use to a community space that could house a cafe and public restrooms that we think will be a really nice amenity for the park. You could also make your way up to the northern edge of the site, where we have more of a garden space with these little garden rooms that you could occupy under the shade of trees, as well as pollinator gardens. So the northern edge is really densely planted and buffered from Newark Avenue, and that helps to make sure that the center of the park is a very lovely and habitable and inviting space. In all the schemes, you're also seeing a consolidated parking garage entrance on the west side off of Central Avenue, and we felt that was, if the parking is indeed going to be part of the project, we felt that the ramp located at this location would have minimal impacts on the park, surrounding that ramp with planting and trees, so it becomes not very visible and not a major part of kind of the park experience when you're inside the park. These diagrams kind of explain how circulation works in the park. So here, all of the circulation leading you to the central plaza, as well as perimeter circulation, so that you could still take a kind of a stroll around the edges of the park if so desired. And programmatically having the kind of the buffer planting and gardens on the edges of the site, and more of the program and active spaces in the center. Concept 2 is called Confluence, recognizing that Journal Square is a vital transportation hub, and it's a place where goods and economic activity and people and culture all converge. And so the park becomes a kind of expression of that convergence and confluence. This scheme has a much more fluid and curvilinear design language. Again, entering the park from Central Avenue and Pavonia Avenue, you would be greeted by a large-scale interactive sculpture at the corner that would be quite visible coming down Pavonia from the PATH station. So we felt that that was a great location for public art that would be a gateway into the park. And unlike the other scheme, where you kind of move through some quite a bit of park before getting to the center, here you're entering right onto the main park, the main gathering space, which is a large central lawn that would have be a flat lawn, but have amphitheater seating along one edge of it. In this scheme, as opposed to the first one, which was keeping the whole park relatively flat and having more gradual slopes, in this case, we have a kind of two-level park where you have an upper level and a lower level, and we use that grade change to integrate amphitheater seating and steps, and also a two-level playground, which that slope between the two levels could have all kinds of play value, like we're showing here on the play slope image. This lawn is complementary to this flexible plaza space that right now is designed to be on axis with the powerhouse as well as the courthouse. And so is this large pavilion that would also be a stage and offer cover for performers when there's a large performance going on. Moving up the park, you would go up the set of stairs or up this ADA accessible pathway to the upper level, where you would find a dog park, garden galleries, which would be more like garden spaces where you have public art that could be rotating and create little garden spaces where you could enjoy the public art. A half-court basketball, which this is roughly the size of that would be tucked up against the parking garage, as well as games and kind of seating areas where people could watch the basketball game. And then at the northern edge, you have more garden spaces and also adult fitness with exercise equipment along that edge, which is another amenity that we heard a lot of community members wanted to see. Circulation wise, as we mentioned before, that kind of diagonal walkway was really important, and here is also provided, except in a more curvilinear form. But the park is really, in all the options, the park is intended to be very open and permeable and inviting to pedestrians passing by on along the street. Programmatically, this one does have more of the kind of main gathering spaces along the southern edge, and the northern are more dedicated to gardens and active recreation. Okay, I will continue on with the third scheme, which is Courthouse Heritage. Courthouse Heritage takes a very different approach by really splitting the site into kind of two halves. The lower half being much more responsive to the formality and symmetry of the architecture of both the powerhouse and the courthouse, and the northern half being much more informal, passive, and green, and taking on a kind of contemporary character from the Justice Complex across the street. Again, coming in from the corner, you're greeted by this beacon, garden spaces, and you come in upon a main flexible plaza with the pavilion that would kind of be within your sight lines as you're coming in from the corner. The plaza opens up to an oval lawn, and all of this is very symmetrical and lined up with the axes of the powerhouse and the courthouse. A play area on the left of that plaza space. And then this scheme really does emphasize the most the kind of topography that we have on our site, and creates a 7-foot grade change between this lower level where you have lawn and plaza, and then this upper level where you would have an overlook and a series of terraces where we could provide lots of spaces for people to kind of perch and watch all the activity happening below. There are still, of course, even with that grade change, there are accessible pathways leading you up to that upper park level, as well as up here. We're even creating a little overlook on the courthouse side. So we're creating lots of spaces around that central space for people to gather and to watch the activity. And that upper northern half of the park becomes a totally different park experience, much less formal, much less open. It would be densely planted with trees, with kind of what we're calling an urban forest. Picnic groves under the shade of these trees, small pavilions, small gathering areas underneath the trees, but takes a very different approach to the northern half, making it almost kind of this escape into nature, whereas the southern half is very formal and civic. The one exception to that is we have proposed as well a dog run in this scheme right up at the northeast corner next to Newark Avenue. And again, in terms of circulation, very fluid movement through the site, very accessible. Lots of places to kind of get lost in the park, as well as to stroll around the perimeter of the park. And so we think this will have a lot of appeal to different user groups. Programmatically, a similar set of program to the other schemes that you've seen today, but the layout is a bit different, with, again, more of that gathering space on the southern half and a much more passive and green northern half. So those are the three concepts. We'll just try to summarize for you the main differences between the three. Concept one, Crossroads, has these prominent diagonal walkways, a large central plaza with skim fountain, a stepped lawn at the Brennan Courthouse site for spillover spectator area. It has more gradual slopes, so the overall park will be a little bit more flat and more open. And it has as special elements, bioswales, pollinator gardens, multi-generational play, and these small corner plazas. The confluence concept has a large central lawn and probably the largest, the second largest, I should say, lawn of the three schemes, with seat steps and a covered stage. It has an events plaza that's aligned with the axes of the courthouse and the powerhouse. It has a tiered playscape on two different levels, and generally a kind of open layout with integrated programs. And some of the special elements include a stage with a pavilion, a large sculpture right at the corner of Pavonia and Central, garden galleries, a dog run, and a half basketball court. And finally, Courthouse Heritage is a split level park separating a highly programmed southern half and a more passive northern half. It of the three, it celebrates the most the formality and the symmetry of the historic architecture. It has multiple overlooks and terraces overlooking the central lawn. And some of the special elements include a shady picnic lawn, these corner beacons at each of the park entrances, overlooks, an urban forest, and a formal lawn and plaza. So with that, we'll pause and take any questions about the designs, about the three schemes. And I think we already have a few. So please, everyone, if you joined late, feel free to use the Q&A feature in this webinar, and we're going to take the questions in order that they come in. So one question was from Ron: will there be water fountains in the park? Yes, I think in all three schemes that we're showing, there is a main water feature or fountain that would be interactive, but also not to take away from the flexibility and the use of those gathering spaces.
I think he's referring to drinking fountains.
Yes. So Ron also then sent another question, statement to clarify the water fountain. I was referring to a drinking water fountain. And yes, we typically do provide drinking fountains in public spaces. We have not yet located those in these plans. But we will also be working with the city, because this will be a city-owned and operated public space. So we'll need to work with kind of the city standards and what their maintenance regimes are in terms of all of the elements that we propose. Will a bicycle rack be installed inside the park? Yes, we do typically provide bike parking, and we want to make sure that we are connecting to the larger bike networks and making sure we're giving places people to park their bikes at the edges of the site so they can come in and really enjoy the park. Again, we're not at a phase of design yet where we're showing a kind of layout of furniture, of things like bicycle racks, trash bins, etc. But that will all kind of come in the next phase of design. Is the public voting on these designs? No, we're not asking you to pick your favorite design. What we're doing today, you'll see in the survey, which actually I can put up for those of you who want to go and start taking that survey. We're asking you to tell us what you think works the best or what you like best about each scheme, and maybe what could be improved about each scheme. And the goal is to collect all of your feedback and to come the next time with a consolidated scheme that takes the best of all the options, and, you know, incorporates all of the feedback that we're hearing in these workshops. So that takes a little bit of pressure off of all of you to select your favorite, because we've heard from a lot of folks that all of them are great in their own ways. So don't worry, we're not expecting you to vote. Just tell us what you like and don't like about each scheme.
On that note, for everyone who's wondering how to access the survey and this information after this webinar, so anyone who used the link on the flyer, which was jcnj.org/courthouse park to access this webinar, tomorrow, after we've wrapped up the webinar and gotten all the materials up, you can go to that same link and it will then direct you to a landing page that will have a link to the survey, a recording of this webinar, a PDF of the presentation that we just went through, and all of the materials that have been shared so far. So everything will be there for you to access and refer to for this survey and for the future of the project. So we have the link here now. If anyone wants to type it in and go ahead and take the survey, but if not, if you want to come back to it, it will be on the city website. Again, it's going to be jcnj.org/courthouse park, and all of these materials will be on there for you.
And also I wanted to add that courthousepark.com, which is the advocacy group's website, we're going to be putting the same link on our landing page. So if you can't remember all that other stuff, courthousepark.com is pretty easy. And we can also direct a link to the same that the city will have.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Barca. We'll move on to the next question from Bernadette. Can you explain the overlook concept a bit more for design number 3? In the picture, it looks like it's a building. Well, I'm sorry, that's not what we intended. Let's go back and look. Yes. So this picture is actually what we wanted you to focus on. I apologize, it's not cropped well, is this area in the front. So this is kind of an upper level with the railing overlooking this central lawn. So this building should not really be the focus of this image. It's really more about this elevated seating area on the lower half of the image. Next question. The second design has more concrete and less green, it seems. Is that correct? We haven't determined yet what the materials are going to be. So in terms of concrete, we can't say that it's going to be concrete, but in terms of hardscape or paving versus planting, we haven't done the analysis to say that the second concept has more paving than the others. It might have, just looking at it here. So that's the type of comment that would be really great to hear from you. If you felt, for example, that it had too much paving, but otherwise you like the scheme, you could say, you could add a comment about that. Or if you felt like, you know, the first and third schemes don't have enough paving for different events, you could add that as a comment. So I'm unable to comment on the exact quantities, but just want to encourage all of you to, those would be the perfect types of things for you to comment on in terms of what you like or dislike about the schemes. Next question, will it have hours of operation or be open 24/7? Can I address that to Barca?
Yes, so we will follow the same policy that we do for other city parks, which is typically a dawn to dusk opening and closing time. Anywhere where we have athletic fields or programming that's specific to sports is handled a little bit differently. There's a permitting process, and the recreation department has other guidelines that they follow for those types of facilities, and that will be incorporated, but it will not be open 24/7.
You mean, Barca, that you'll have gates on it?
Yes.
Oh, really? So it'll
like
be,
other city parks that have fencing around that are open and closed, where there are facilities like that, this will be handled similarly. There may be elements of the park that don't require that type of opening and closing, which we'll determine in the next stage. But anywhere where there is fencing, or any sort of, thing that needs to be secured, it would not be 24/7.
so we wouldn't be able to walk through it to get home after certain hours? I'm confused. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's something, again, that when we develop the design a little bit further, we'll have to figure out. But if there are facilities in there that require the recreation department to regulate the usage, then it wouldn't be left completely open. But if there are other elements, like there are city parks in various neighborhoods that can provide that type of access and don't need to be regulated in terms of usage, then those don't need to be closed or opened.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Barka. Next question is, what does water runoff look like, especially in the lower areas? How will rainwater be collected? Great question. It's too early to say in terms of what our drainage strategy is. Again, that's something that we're going to, those kinds of details will continue developing in the next phase. But stormwater management is very important to us, and integrating green infrastructure so that we are not introducing more runoff into the city's stormwater system is very important. So we're going to make sure that that is something that's addressed and we're not directing water off our site. Next question is, could you address security issues regarding the north end of number 3? I grew up in JC in the 1970s, so have a sense that urban areas go up and down. Really great question. We as SWA, we've designed many public spaces across the country, and we know that security is always a concern in dense urban spaces, in dense urban public spaces. One lesson that we've learned is that even if you introduce lots of planting and trees, there are ways in which it can be done that really mitigate and deter any illicit activities from happening. The main one being that it should still be very visible from public streets. So that area would be, that northern half of number 3 would be kind of level with the sidewalk, not raised up. So it would still be very visible from the sidewalk. The plantings that we introduced there would be for the understory planting, meaning everything that's happening underneath the trees. We would only use kind of low shrubs or ground covers so that we're not creating kind of dense vegetation that would block views. And for the trees, we typically prune trees way up so the branches are far above eye level. So you're creating a kind of zone from, say, your kind of knee or waist height all the way up to above eye level that's totally clear and open for all the public to see. So that will be a strategy that we utilize here to deter any unwanted or illicit activities from happening. Next question, are the drinking water fountains traditional or able to fill water bottles? Will there be blue light public safety poles? Why didn't concept 1 offer space for a dog run? Okay, I'll answer these one by one, and I'll let others please feel free to jump in and help me with these. Drinking water fountains, traditional or able to fill water bottles. Again, haven't determined that yet. Although in many projects, I can say many projects that we're working on now, the bottle fillers are becoming very common and much more of a request from communities rather than just kind of a typical drinking fountain. If that is a request, please put that in your comments and we'll take that into account as we develop these details. Will there be blue light public safety poles? Barka, is that something that you can answer in terms of how the city typically does that in public parks?
Sure. We can install those. It's, you know, some parks have different safety infrastructure in place with you know, cameras and ability for people to alert public safety officials if they need help. So it's definitely something that we can implement. I don't know of many of the city parks that have that, but it's not something that we're opposed to.
Okay. Great. Why didn't concept one offer space for a dog run? We did try to propose a variety of program. So you'll note that, for example, option 2 had a basketball court, while options 1 and 3 did not. So there is a little bit of difference in terms of the program of the 3 options. So that could certainly be a comment that you add to concept 1 is, you know, for example, I love it, but it needs a dog run. So we intentionally provide a little bit of differentiation in the program so that that could be something that the community could comment on. And then a final question from Yvette is, do all 3 concepts fall within the $4 million budget? Concept 3 seems like it might be very expensive. The budget that Barca had mentioned before was 14 million, but that does include demolition costs. It's kind of all in costs for demolition and design and construction. In terms of the cost, we have a cost estimator on board who is going to prepare a cost estimate once we refine these designs down to a single consolidated preferred concept. But in terms of the 3 concepts here, programmatically, they're somewhat similar. So we don't think that there would be a huge cost difference between the 3 options. Next question, did I hear there will be underground parking? Barca, did you want to take that one too?
Yes, so currently there is underground parking beneath the building that's currently at this site. We are considering the option of retaining underground parking. However, if we were to do that, it would require essentially reconstructing the parking garage because the condition that it's in right now doesn't allow us to move forward with the new park design and the elements of the new park on the surface while leaving the structure the way it is right now. It requires quite a bit of rehabilitation. So as we move forward with this process and try to figure out what the design of the park is going to be and what the overall cost will be, there will come a time where we will have to determine whether reconstruction of that parking garage underground is something that the budget will allow for or not. So it's something that remains to be seen at this point, but we are proceeding with the assumption that that we can retain it, but it's just something that we don't know yet until we get updated analyses of what the cost will be of the demolition of the building, reconstruction of the parking, and then implementation of all of the park elements itself.
Thanks, Barca. Next question, are there too many elements or too much being included as it likely will be heavily used with the courthouse across the street, increasing population, nearby transit hub, and a substantial homeless population in the area? Maybe less is more. I think that's a very, very good comment. And it sounds like a comment less than a question. But we will just say that for designing public spaces, we do feel it's important to provide some kind of attractions and amenities that are going to bring lots of different users and users from, you know, workers who might be there during the day on a weekday to families who might come in the, you know, on a Saturday when the workers aren't there. So making it inviting for a wide range of users to ensure that it'll be active throughout the day and throughout the week we think is really important to a great and successful public space and to public safety. So just want to make that note, but again, thank you. And that's a great comment and something for us to consider. How much longer will public comments be incorporated until the final design is determined? So for that, I'll go back to one of the earlier slides. This is kind of the timeline to the final master plan, which will be completed this October. We are having these series of workshops, and the survey that we currently have is going to remain open until July 10th. So in addition to comments and questions that we received today, you can add your further comments on the survey until the 10th. At that point, we will close the survey, and we're going to continue to refine the concepts based on the feedback. We're going to kind of synthesize everything we heard and start to develop a consolidated single concept that incorporates the feedback. At that, in late August, and the date of that meeting is yet to be determined, we're going to arrange another public workshop where we'll come and present that final concept. And that'll be another opportunity for the community to weigh in and say, yes, you heard us on point A, but point B you haven't done quite enough of. So that's another opportunity to influence the design, and we'll incorporate those comments into the final master plan, which will be prepared and presented to the community in October. So I hope that answers the question from anonymous attendee. Yvette asks, what is the building in concept 3? Not quite sure which building is being referred to.
They might be referring to the powerhouse, Stephen.
Okay, the powerhouse in all 3 concepts is basically the same. What we've understand from the county is that it's being decommissioned, which is wonderful news because it allows for us to basically repurpose that building, which is a beautiful historic building that's kind of like a mini-me to the courthouse, the Brennan Courthouse, and use it to serve the park and to provide some of the amenities that we heard that the community wanted, including a public restroom and potentially a small kind of concession or cafe area, as well as maybe even a community space if we have enough space. We haven't yet looked at the floor plans and exactly how much space we'll have allotted to us in the powerhouse. But that is the intent right now. And those 3 options, all 3 concepts propose the same use for the powerhouse.
And I just wanted to add, a lot of people might not know that it can't be removed. It's historic. So it's considered part of the Brennan Courthouse historic designation. So it has to stay regardless of what use we can make of it.
Yep, good point, Laura. Next question, any room for a pickleball court? I think absolutely. The great thing about pickleball is it's relatively compact. So it doesn't have a huge footprint like some other sports courts or sports facilities. So if that's something that is desired, please enter that into the comments. Next, I'm not sure if this is a question or a comment, like the bathroom, question mark. I'll assume that that's a question and that Lisa likes the bathroom. Lisa, if I misinterpreted, please just enter another comment or question. Bernadette asks, for concept 2, would the Brennan lawn be easily accessible from the rest of the park? The other designs very deliberately integrate that lawn into the concept, but that one seems kind of disjointed. Really great observation. I think the intent is in all the schemes for the park and the Brennan Courthouse to feel very connected. So we intentionally did not put any, dense vegetation along that eastern edge of the park. We did not provide, put walls or any major, anything that makes it feel divided from the park. But we did, again, just for the purposes of showing optionality and differences between the schemes, we wanted to show some schemes where we integrated the Courthouse Park site more, and others where we really kept that lawn much more kind of quote unquote pure, so that it feels like the 4 quadrants of the lawn, formal lawn around the courthouse have been completed. So again, that is something that you should all feel welcome to comment on, the degree of kind of intervention on the courthouse park, on the Brennan Courthouse site, and how strongly you want us to integrate that lawn with the park. Lots of great questions. Keep them coming. Heather Sporn asks, have you planned for seating around the fountain? I think in all of the schemes, there is some seating, maybe not directly around the fountain, because in all of the schemes, the fountain is in a more plaza kind of environment, a flexible plaza environment. And by putting fixed seating, you would be reducing the flexibility of that plaza space, but certainly could incorporate seating and furniture that could be movable around the fountain. Will the park be smoke-free or have smoking areas? Barca, how does the city typically handle that?
We typically have smoke-free areas. I don't know of any designated smoking areas in any of the public parks.
Okay. Next question is, do you know how big is Riverview Park? I don't know that one off the top of my head.
I think it actually, Brian, chime in if you know exactly. I think it actually might be right around the size of what we're anticipating this park to be, which is 3.5 acres, maybe slightly larger if you incorporate that field off to the side on Ogden Avenue.
That's correct, Director. Riverview is a little bit larger than Courthouse, but smaller than Hamilton.
Right. So I would say around 4 acres, maybe.
Yeah, right around there.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Barca. The area around this park has a lot of traffic that can be dangerous for people who walk to the park. How will pedestrian safety around the area be addressed? I'll start this, but I'd love for Barca and or Brian and others to chime in terms of kind of larger plans for streetscape around the park. But certainly we are trying to plan for pedestrian connections, and making sure the park is very easily accessible. We've looked at kind of the existing crosswalks around and made sure that we're providing easy access into the park from those adjacent streets. We could, this is outside of the boundaries of the park itself, but there are always like traffic calming measures that the city could consider as well. But I'll let Brian and Barca chime in on that.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I think that's a good start. And for everyone to know that when we initiated this project specifically for the park, we always asked the team to, not think of the site as an isolated site, and to think of how people are accessing it. Of course, we want to serve the residents who are directly adjacent to where this park will be, because that is the community that's been without park space for all of these years. And we anticipate that the residents in that area will walk or bike to the site. And then beyond that, of course, there is a lot of regional traffic and arterial roadways and highways that are surrounding this area, with 139, Kennedy Boulevard, and then even city streets like Summit and Bergen and Baldwin. that are carrying large volumes of vehicular traffic. So being mindful of all of that, we see this park and the timeline that it's on as a good opportunity to make some of the improvements on those nearby streets and intersections that we need to address for pedestrian safety specifically. And so we've initiated a process to take a look at the Five Corners intersection and see how we can make that safer with pedestrians as the primary user in mind. We're starting to look at Newark Avenue and see how we can extend some of the traffic calming and safety interventions that we've made on Newark Avenue in other parts of the city and extend that up into this area, basically continue it up from Dickinson High School and then towards the courthouse and the park. So we see this as an opportunity to continue a lot of the work that we've been doing on other streets to make them safer and just extend it so that we can make the access to this site easier. And all of that to be done with the people who are the most vulnerable on our streets as in mind at the forefront, which are pedestrians, cyclists, not motorists necessarily. So that's our plan. And it is very likely that a lot of those projects will probably move more quickly than the full completion of this park, which will be great because then by the time the park is done, we've already set a new pattern of how people are accessing the site. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Barka. Next question is, what is the Brennan Lawn? I guess when I was referring to the Brennan Lawn, I was just talking about the current lawn that exists around the Brennan Courthouse. I'll go back to the aerial image. So this is the Brennan Courthouse, and there's a lawn here, there's a lawn here, and the lawn here. So this project will include kind of removing most of this surface parking and replacing it with the lawn so that corner matches the other four corners around the courthouse.
And Stephen, I wanted to add too that the other corners of the lawn around the Brennan Courthouse will not be part of this park. I'm not sure a lot of people will understand that because I think it's security reasons as we know it now. So it might look weird to have lawn here that you can access and lawn that you can't, but I think that's going to be one of the things you guys are going to work on to differentiate the usable space from the off limits space.
Right. Heather Sporn, I'm not sure I understand your question. It says could be the edge of fountain. Maybe that was in reference to prior question about seating around the fountain. Next, how confident can we be that the existing parking will become and remain park?
So I think this goes back to the question we were just talking about with the lot. So a lot, the city has passed legislation to assume ownership of this property and begin the process of converting the site into the park, which is obviously a long process. However, the exact details will only be finalized once the county also passes parallel legislation on their end to transfer the property over. And then once it is under city jurisdiction and city ownership, I think at that point we can become highly confident that the uses that we're proposing for all of these different spaces around the site are actually what will happen in the future. So that's one of the final sort of administrative pieces that we're waiting on going through before we can say that with 100% confidence. But all of the conversations that we've had so far lead us to believe that the things that we're sharing with you today with these plans are made with assumptions based on those discussions that we've had between the city and the county. So I would say a high level of confidence now, but we can't say 100% confidence until the legislation is passed, the property has been transferred, and the city can then make the design decisions about property that it owns.
And Barker, I might just chime in too. I'm not sure if that anonymous attendee was meaning the parking surrounding the courthouse, which is street parking, or the surface lot, which I was under the impression was always supposed to be historic, the lot being used by the Brennan Courthouse, and that they were given an exception to put a lot there. So it was just an exception that wasn't supposed to be forever. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure by the question.
Okay, I understood the question to mean the surface lot because they mentioned lawn as
Right.
opposed to the parking remaining.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
and I think we did address
Yep.
the question about underground. So for anyone who missed it, feel free to, go back into the recording and catch the moments where we talked about the underground parking as well.
Okay, I think Barker, you could just roll into the next one.
Sure. So the next question is, the concern is that the Brennan Courthouse workers might want their close by parking so that if the park design depends on the lawn being lawn, it might get undermined. Yes, totally understand the need for people who are working in the Brennan Courthouse to have the parking. Again, it's something that we're working through both with the Justice Complex and all of the parking for employees that's incorporated into the new Justice Complex, as well as other parking supply that is in this area before we go ahead and take that completely off the table as part of the design of this park. So we will definitely be mindful of it, but at the same time, we don't want to miss an opportunity to deliver the best possible park at this site that we can, especially because there isn't anything else that exists in the neighborhood. So thank you for that comment. The next one is, will bike lanes be extended to integrate park access? We really hope so, Dawn. That is the plan right now. Although, we would really want to get community support for extending the bike lanes closer to the park from the Dickinson High School side, farther down on Newark Avenue, and then possibly extending it further beyond the park so that we could connect it to the neighborhoods to the west. So yes, we're very hopeful that we can advance that project with community support and council support.
Great. How would the Brennan lawn be separated from the rest of the park? Would they be at the same grade? Going back to the plans. So I think each of the schemes treats that edge a little bit differently. These concept 1 and concept 2 basically keep the existing path that separates one site from the other, keeps the alignment of that path in place. And whereas concept 3 starts to kind of bleed into the Brennan Courthouse site. In terms of the grade change, what's happening is the Brennan Courthouse is higher than our site at this end, but as you move north towards Newark, the courthouse lawn and the park are at relatively the same grade. So we're not really proposing to do any major grade change to the courthouse site. That condition would more or less remain, and that's what is shown in the 3 concepts. Next comment or question is, will or can the parking that is built with the Justice Complex be available for people who visit the new park?
We don't know. That would be something that the county determines because it is under their jurisdiction and they will operate it. So it's certainly something that we can bring to their attention and make the request, but it's not something that we can answer as the city.
This is the first time we've had no open questions. Thank you very much for all of those questions. Really love the curiosity and the engagement. So we'll continue to stay on a bit longer for more questions that might come in, but just want to remind everyone we've provided the link to the online survey, which you can also, I put it in the chat to everyone. You can just click on that link and start this survey responses as well.
And I just wanted to chime in, courthousepark.com. There's a link to sign up. We send out information through email blasts, not that many. So if you're not on that list, please, please, please go to the website, courthousepark.com, and make your way to the sign-in page and add your name to our list so we can continue to get you information.
Stephen and team, a couple of questions just came in through the Q&A, thanking the consultant team. So I did, on behalf of the city, just want to echo the sentiment. The team has done a great job, and I think you can see from the questions and the comments that the residents really feel like the designs capture what they've been looking for with this park. So thank you for the great presentation and all of the work that you've done on this park. And I speak on behalf of the residents and on behalf of the city as we move into the next phase of the project. And to everyone who's joining from the community, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to watch the presentation and be engaged and give us all of your questions and thoughts. I just want to say that all of the feedback that we get from you at this round will be really critical in figuring out what things are prioritized when we go to the next round of design and start to finalize what this park will actually look like and what form it will take. So please do fill out the survey, give us your thoughts, and please tell others who weren't able to make it to our in-person meetings over the last week or to join this webinar that they can watch the recording, they can still fill out the survey, they can email me directly. We really want to hear from you before we make decisions and bring this to the next stage. So thank you again, and we really, really look forward to hearing more from you.
Thanks, Barca. It looks like mostly they're just compliments rolling in. So I'm assuming that means that there are no more questions, but also wanted to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And we'll continue to keep the lines of communications open. So please email and fill out the survey, and we'll be speaking with you again soon.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you
all.
Thanks,
everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Stephen.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks,
night.
Amanda.